Hi, I am Tana Russell, Assistant Director with the Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling. Welcome to this live stream free webinar on problem gambling screens for Asian communities. Whether you are watching live or on demand, this is not for CE credits. It is just for education and information sharing. Also, this is being streamed both to Facebook and YouTube. Therefore, it is not a confidential platform. We encourage you to post comments and ask questions of our guests using the chat. Just remember that it's not a private platform, so only share what is yours to share publicly. This episode is one of the things we're doing to prepare for Problem Gambling Awareness Month, which is in March, as well as Gambling Disorder Screening Day, which is March 14th. Last year, we did similar episodes, one focusing on working with Native American communities, another Hispanic Latino communities, and the year before that was an episode just on Gambling Disorder Screening Day and an e-screener. So you can check out those videos if you would like to on our website or YouTube channel. With that, I would like to introduce our guests for today's episode. We have with us, and they'll be joining me here shortly, Harumi Hashimoto. She is a mental health, substance use, and gambling counselor. She is the clinical director of recovery services at Asian Counseling and Referral Services in Seattle. She is also a member of the Washington State Gambling Counselor Certification Committee. And we also have Frank Song. He is a student of clinical psychology at the University of Washington, working on his doctoral dissertation on problem gambling and speculative training in young adults. And he's also a counselor at Asian Counseling and Treatment Services, which has offices both in Lakewood and Linwood. Thank you both for being here and taking time out of your very busy schedules to join me on this episode. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tana.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about you, the work you do, and why this topic is important to you.
Okay, so Frank, can I go first? So I'm Harumi Hashimoto, and I am an immigrant from Japan, where pachinko and horse racing are very popular gambling activities. Here in this country, there are broader gambling options everywhere in your life. You will start to gamble for fun, for social gathering, entertainment. Gambling addiction is a hidden disease. The more you are exposed to gambling, the higher a chance to develop problem gambling, which can lead to gambling addiction. When you feel like you are losing control over gambling, it's important to seek help before it causes significant impact on your life. Thank you.
Thank you. And Frank, tell us a little bit more about you, the work you do, and why this topic is important for you.
Yes, Tana. So, like Harumi, myself, I am also an immigrant from South Korea, and I am definitely motivated by knowing that prevalence of gambling and problem gambling in Korea and also here in the US, across communities, is one of the things that has led me into this field. I'm currently a clinical psychology PhD student at University of Washington. And here I've had a chance to approach problem gambling from as a researcher by running studies with young adults in Washington State who have problem gambling issues, and also as a counselor at Asian Counseling Treatment Services. And this topic is particularly important for me because with research, it's clear that Asian Americans are disproportionately affected by problem gambling. And even as access to high quality problem gambling assessment and treatment services are available, they're particularly lacking for Asian Americans. A 2013 study with high school students in the US actually found good data to demonstrate this gap. But Asian American adolescents in the study were found to be more likely to be engaging in gambling and to also have higher risk of problem gambling compared to the broader population. And so I am passionate about researching to learn more about the prevalence of gambling in Asian American communities and to figure out what are the most effective treatment methods and to be part of the efforts to disseminate some of the research findings.
Excellent. Well, I am really looking forward to hearing more about what you have to say on that. Let's kind of get this conversation started with language. We have terms like Asian communities or culture, or Asian American communities and culture, and language matters, and it can people identify in different ways. What are some terminologies that you might recommend for different settings and ways that individuals working with people of diverse backgrounds can be most culturally respectful with their words? Whoever wants to start.
So my agency, Asian Counseling and Referral Service, our target population is Asian immigrant refugees and American-born Asian Pacific Islanders. I am not sure what is the most respective way, inclusive way to indicate this population. We used to call it Asian Pacific Islander, but now we say Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other Asian communities. We are still not sure what is the most appropriate way to describe this population. How about you, Blank?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I think from a research perspective, I think I found Asian American and Pacific Islander label to be acceptable. From clinical perspective, working with clients, I have found Asian American, or if they identify as Pacific Islander or having mixed heritage, of course, I follow the client's lead in their identity. That being said, I think I found many clients are also comfortable with just simply Asian as opposed to Asian American. And keeping that in mind, I also try to find out more, what is their heritage, and to at the individual level to understand and acknowledge the different ethnocultural groups within Asian communities, and asking client firsthand how they identify their ethnic background or backgrounds, keeping in mind that they may come from multiple heritages, and asking upfront, I think, has been the most helpful approach when working with individual clients.
Thank you. That really kind of echoes my personal experience in the counseling field as well, working with individuals from a great diversity of backgrounds. When I would ask them, just what do you identify as, it often would be multiple things, right? And it's not necessarily going to be the specific term we might read in a research paper, right? It's going to be something else that's more personal to them and maybe isn't as easy to just check a single box for. But I think, to me, that was one way I really tried to be open and receptive of whatever they identified as and whatever that was, because it doesn't make a difference to me. And then try to adjust the paperwork to fit them, not to try to require a human being to mold themselves to fit a piece of paper. So tell us a little bit about some barriers. And Frank, you mentioned this before. Maybe you can start this one off. What are some barriers when it comes to providing services, behavioral health services, gambling treatment services for these communities?
Yeah, so I can definitely name a few that come to mind. One is lack of awareness about the availability of services um, for addressing problem gambling, and this is has continued to be an issue, and I think that many agencies and organizations are working to tackle this problem. For instance, the Washington State HCA has brochures and information packets available in many languages about available problem gambling counseling services. And yet, simply the lack of awareness about the availability of these services continues to be an issue, as well as availability of other programs such as the statewide self-exclusion program, which I believe was launched last year here in Washington. And from a more cultural standpoint, shame and stigma of gambling or gambling to the point of losing money, wasting money, going to a place of from having money to having struggles with money. These are big factors in many Asian communities and communities, of course, outside Asian communities, and the culture of keeping gambling secret from family and friends and self, and which also makes it harder for them to attend treatment because they would also be clients might also have to keep that secret from whoever they're living with, whoever they might keep them accountable and so forth. So on top of all of that, language barrier is certainly an issue. And there are agencies like ACRS and ACTS and that try to broaden our reach through counselors that have that are skilled in multiple languages. And there are screens for gambling available in multiple languages. And to me, I think there is a lot of work in progress to reduce some of these barriers, and it's important to acknowledge that there are multiple layers that get in the way of the clients to get treatment from simply awareness to actually being able to follow through and keep coming into treatment.
Mm-hmm. And if I could circle back to shame for a minute, that's one thing that we know is a huge problem in the problem gambling field as a whole. Is it can be very shaming. However, in some cultures and families, even gambling is just a thing. There's not really any shame attached to it at all. I'm wanting to know: were you saying that maybe in Asian cultures, there's some nuances there that might kind of elevate the shame that might come when there are problems with gambling? They might be dealing with more stigma from their families or friends because of it than maybe you might see in general population as a whole.
Yeah, what I've seen in research and in clinical settings is that there's uh, sort of in many Asian communities, there's both a more prevalent gambling culture and more stigma about gambling and having problems as a result, which is quite interesting in a way to think about.
Yeah.
Um, but part of that could be in a lot of immigrant cultures, not just Asian, there is often a collective focus on social status and like collective aspiration for moving up in the American society, and that can also often be a motivating factor for gambling being more prevalent as uh, the promise of hitting it big and moving up in the society and being able to kind of pride oneself in having made it as a success. Implicitly and explicitly, I think, can often play into what makes gambling more prevalent in Asian cultures, and at the same time, um, in similar way that mental health problems are often stigmatized in these collectivistic cultures, having problems as a result of these aspirations and collective goals, you might say, is makes it all the more difficult to open up and is sometimes stigmatized even more. And so I think the relationship between the two can be complex and can be quite nuanced depending on different communities. But that's the overall trend that I found and can be difficult to parse out. And so I would certainly encourage counselors and professionals working with individuals who might have problem gambling concerns to explore what are the dynamics in their own communities.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fascinating. And that seems like it would be quite frustrating to be in that position where you are struggling and might be realizing you need some help, but as you said, A, there's fewer services to choose from, and B, not only might the person be hiding the gambling, but now if they seek help, they feel like they have to hide that too, and now they're carrying two things that are, quite close to their chest, and that's a lot to juggle. Yeah. Harumi, what else comes to mind for you for this?
So, yeah, I completely agree what Frank shared. And also, Asian culture, we do not have a help-seeking behavior. When we have problem, we try our best to resolve on our own. Especially, I can see the phenomena among Asian male gamblers. They have problem. They don't want to share with anyone. Oftentimes, they also do not want to be completely honest with counselors. And I can see they are raised not to show your weakness. When you have problem, resolve it on your own. That is, I think, fundamental parenting philosophy that is probably common in Asian culture. So it's difficult to break that barrier, get into their deeper internal world, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I imagine that in other areas of their life, that's served them well. The ability to have that mindset of I can do this, I can accomplish this, I can work for this. That strength and independence has probably been quite an asset in many other areas of their life. I also imagine the unique thing about gambling is it kind of has this allure of just a little bit more and I'll get better at this, right? Just a little bit more and I'll get the win or I'll beat the game or this. So it kind of caters to people who are strong and independent and willing to just keep working for something. And what normally might be a value and a strength, it kind of turns it on its head once it gets into creating a pattern of problems in that chase. So tell us a little bit about gambling screens. You all are in the clinical field, behavioral health field. You screen for many things. And as specialists in problem gambling, this would be one thing you screen for too. So talk to us a little bit about how you use gambling screens.
I can start off.
Go
That's
ahead.
all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, in a comprehensive mental health or behavioral health intake screens, gambling is often overlooked, unfortunately. And when in instances where gambling screen was integrated into broader surveys of mental health or wellness, it has consistently found that the screen has yielded very important and relevant information about gambling problems in clients that might come in with co-occurring disorders that many counselors might not think to associate with gambling. And for instance, I'm thinking of, I believe this was in Pierce County drug court several years ago. And Tana, you could expand on this as well, because I know ECPG had played a big part in this, including problem gambling survey into the participants' screening helped to discover that I believe it was 20 or 30% of the drug court participants were also meeting the problem gambling criteria, which is incredible and could have gone completely overlooked and provided thus an opportunity for treatment. as for how do we go about integrating these questions, because there's already so many questions for counselors to get through with their clients, I can recommend 2 gambling screens that are very brief and have found good research evidence to be predictive of problem gambling issues that warrant further assessment and treatment. One is Brief Bisocial Gambling Screen, and it's a 3-question survey that looks at the past 12 months and asks if the client has felt restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to stop or cut down on gambling, or try to keep family or friends from knowing how much they gambled, or if they had financial trouble as a result of gambling that required help from living expenses from friends or loved ones. So that is the Brief Bisocial Gambling Screen, or BBGS, that is often used. And another one that I can recommend is simply called the Lie Bet Test, and it's 2 questions. And it asks, have you ever felt the need to bet more and more money? The second one being, have you ever had to lie to people important to you about how much you've gambled? And I believe for both of these screens, research found more than 80% consistency, accuracy in being able to predict gambling problems, for which that is an opportunity for clients to get additional assessment and treatment with just several more seconds, maybe another minute of assessment time.
Thank you. I'm really glad you read those questions because they're simple. They're short and sweet. They're not hard to answer. They're yes or no. An individual can find these online for themselves as well. So they're not a trade secret. We've got many of these on our website. So individuals can use these as sort of a guide to determine, did I just blow my budget and it was an oops? Or is this something that might indicate there's a greater problem going on? Because gambling can be a recreation, but when it starts to cause problems and those problems don't go away despite a person's attempts to cut back, then we might see that there's a health disorder that has set in. And that's a little bit of a different thing than just an oops. So these gambling screens are really good for that. I'm glad you read those off. And the Lie Bet is just 2 questions, easy to memorize, easy to throw into a conversation. It's not too much to add for clinicians who have to screen for everything. It's not a whole lot to try to add to what they already do. Harumi, tell us a little bit about how you use gambling screens. And it looks like you might be muted.
Thank you. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, many people reluctant to seek help for services. So it's very important to collaborate with other healthcare providers, like medical care providers and behavioral health providers. And we usually ask to include 3 questions from BBGS and during the intake. So if anyone answers yes to one of those questions, we ask them to refer those people to us so we can do more comprehensive screening and assessment upon their agreement. That agreement part is a little bit difficult. Sometimes we provide warm handoff and make them feel comfortable a little bit.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a warm handoff looks like? If someone does a screen and they say yes to some questions, then the individual who's working with them in that moment might hand them off to a gambling specialist. What does that look like?
So it's still internal effort. We have like 3 clinical departments, and one department, mental health, they serve probably 2,000 people, clients, and intake screener and intake specialist, they ask the 3 questions. And when client answers yes, they send us a list. And it's comprehensive effort. case manager who are assigned to those people contact us and we arrange meeting. They most likely they require specific language skills. So we join upon client's agreement. We join their session and introduce our services and ask if they feel comfortable. And also we talk about little bit education, how gambling can affect, pros and cons. And we gradually engage more and bring those people to program gambling services. But it's not just one time. It's not easy. It's a process, kind of process.
Excellent. So you might have someone in the mental health department treating them for whatever brought them in the door. Gambling screen's part of the thing they're going to get in that process.
Mhm.
Send the gambling specialist the list, who then follow up or join the session with the client, introduce themselves, maybe some brief interventions, a little education, but this is a continual checking in on this person.
Yes.
That's beautiful. I think that really sends the message that there's this whole team of providers
Mhm.
working on that client's behalf to coordinate their time to make sure that individual is getting all of their needs met as much as within your power of your facility.
Right. It's a like care team approach.
That is fantastic. I think what I have run into a lot is sometimes facilities will think, I can't add another screening into the standard paperwork for every client. We've got too much. But hopefully, if they're watching this, they see they're short, they're quick. Some people will say no to everything. If it doesn't apply, you move on. And if they say yes, then you can follow up. And what stops other people, I believe, is that they'll say, well, if I ask the questions, now I have to have a process to deal with that. They might be worried if they don't have a certified gambling counselor on staff, then what do they do? So there is the Washington Problem Gambling Helpline, 1-800-547-6133, where either a professional can call or a person can call for themselves if they need help. It doesn't matter, and find any certified gambling counselor in the state of Washington nearest them. So for facilities that don't have a specialist on staff to do an internal referral, they can call the helpline and connect them and do an external referral. So there's always a response that can be done to be able to follow up with the gambling screen and coordinate care, if it's whether inside your agency or outside. Thank you. Anything else you guys want to mention here? Like, what are some ways to, if someone's watching this and they're like, oh, I could start doing this in my agency, that's really nice. But I like to tell people the magic of gambling screens is not necessarily in just asking the questions. It's really in how that moment with the person to be able to, like what Frank was talking about earlier, reduce that shame a little bit. And what you said just a minute ago, Harumi, checking in to make sure they're comfortable. Do you guys have some tips on how to use gambling screens to help someone to feel more at ease with the process, that they're not being judged, and that gambling and problems with gambling are actually quite common and there is help for them?
Yeah, I would say just as any other problem, just as with any other problems to assess, taking a non-judgmental approach, coming from a place of empathy, can go a long way, and building rapport to start off, and finding that common ground, finding some way that you and the client can connect as humans and kind of drop the guard is a good place to start, especially for gambling, because for many clients, there's a lot of self-denial about gambling behavior. And that means that even sometimes unknowingly, they may be lying, or they may be overlooking problems that they have. And oftentimes they may not even be aware of the problem. And in order to be able to assess their behaviors and be able to describe their experiences with gambling, or say night out at a casino, or they may talk about drinking that they had, and you might want to ask, oh, where was it? Where did it take place? And just kind of approach it from a friendly angle, rather than like an investigative approach, just as someone who might ask out of genuine interest, and that could uncover more information and help to find out, oh, well, okay, this happened in a card room, or this happened in a what else happened that night. And so that could be one example of helping the client to feel more at ease and coming from a place of genuine care and curiosity. And often that is an approach that can tackle cognitive unawareness or self-denial that clients might have about gambling. And Harumi, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, or your approach.
Sure. I'm going to start, like you said, building rapport. Then I will assess which stage of change the person in front of me is at. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, late preparation, action. And I will change my approach based on where they are. When they are just pre-contemplation, which is very common, I might just give my business card. If you happen to want to talk to me again, this is my card. Keep this card. And oftentimes it works. They call me maybe a few weeks later or even a few months later. And if they're ready they recognize that they have a problem, they're willing to schedule intake appointment. So it really, we need to assess where they are, and we just take action accordingly. But like again, connection, rapport is very basic key to be successful.
Thank you. And I like what you said, just call me whenever you're ready. Call me anytime. I am your go-to person for any questions related to gambling or problem gambling. And also sometimes what we can miss is maybe they're not gambling, but they're being impacted by someone else's. Right? Someone else in the family might be gambling, and I've just asked them a bunch of questions about their gambling, but maybe I didn't ask if they're being impacted by someone else's. And sometimes that ends up in the conversation. Oh, wow, I'm going to give this card to this other person that I know. I'm going to see if they're going to call you. And it might open the door to get help to someone else who needs it that's not even in the room.
That's true.
Are there any kind of follow-up questions you like to ask in these conversations, particularly with all these nuances you guys have been talking about when working with Asian communities and what they may be bringing to the table with them?
So, if they are ready and if they share what is the program, I want to start with case management to gain trust from the person. For example, I have this amount that I cannot pay. My rent is 2 months behind. I will start with those programs instead of gambling, just to gain the trust. And gradually, what causes this problem? Oh, gambling. So maybe we can talk about how we can reduce this problem that you are experiencing now.
Excellent. I think money is such a huge one with this. Who doesn't relate to financial stress time and again, right? So our society is very money dependent, and when someone is reporting that they're having some stress that's caused from financial stressors, it might be related to gambling, it might not. But what a beautiful follow-up question to ask to find out if it is, because some people might go straight to financial management, never even ask about gambling, and they've completely missed the root of what's going on there. Excellent. That's a really great tip. Thank you. Frank, anything else that comes to mind for you?
Speaking of financial stress, I would certainly assess the financial impact and start to get a sense of what is the client's awareness of the negative consequences of gambling. It can be, of course, wide-ranging, from relationship to um, affecting other close loved ones and so forth. But I think um, finding out the level of awareness that the client might have in terms of the direct and indirect effects of gambling, starting with the amount of money that they've spent and the amount of time that they've spent. And I would also ask about what are some related behaviors that might go with traditional gambling. For instance, how are they managing their money? And are they making risky investments that are more akin to gambling? And there might be other financial behaviors that are just as detrimental or even more that might have similar roots as what's causing their gambling problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. So finally, help services. Where can people find help for this in our state? Where might they go? Harumi, do you want to talk about your facility and other resources you might recommend? And you're muted. That's our life these days.
Okay, thank you. So, Asian Counseling and Referral Service, ACRS, provides gambling counseling services in 8 Asian languages. And we provide services not only gamblers, but also, like Tina mentioned, we provide services to family members or significant others who have been impacted by somebody's program gambling. And I think Amy is here and she will probably post our contact information. We can provide brief psychoeducation and assessment. And if they are ready, we're gonna do intake services. We can provide services in person or remote. Service will be free of charge if they are resident of Washington State because we are nonprofit and we are 100% publicly funded.
That is fantastic. I would just want to emphasize when people are seeking help for problem gambling, often a initial and legitimate concern is, I don't have money to get counseling services. I can't afford it because of the gambling. But in Washington State, we recognize that conundrum. That's exactly what it does. And so thank you for pointing out that at your facility as well, you can provide services free of charge to individuals because you have funding to cover it. Thank you. And Frank?
Similarly, Asian Counseling and Treatment Services offers in-person and remote problem gambling counseling. And it is also offered for free, thanks to Washington State funding that has made it available. And being a more comprehensive treatment service provider, ACTS also has substance use disorder counseling, as well as general mental health support. And so I would certainly encourage clients and those looking for support on behalf of loved ones to reach out and to schedule an intake to find out more about whether you'll be a right fit. other resources that I might recommend are certainly the hotline that Tana has mentioned earlier is a great resource for finding available local resources and can connect you to local counseling as well as support groups that may be effective and help the client to feel motivated and encouraged and find hope. There are also some quick online resources that I recommend. And the first one that I found helpful with many of my clients, specifically those who have struggled with a lot of stigma and sense of shame and guilt from gambling, is I can share this in the private chat, and hopefully it'll be shared with those watching later on. This is a website called Brain Connections from, I believe it's made by our neighbors in Canada through their governmental agency. And it is I believe a 3 or 4 minute video that helps to viewers to very easily understand that gambling addiction has biological, neurological roots. And I believe it is a very effective conceptualization that it is not a moral failing or a personality flaw, rather a real neurological phenomenon that is developed over time, and that it takes treatment, not just motivation and will, but treatment to be able to address this issue, and that it's not, and meeting it with shame is not going to be so effective. And the more one can acknowledge that it is a pathological and biological issue, it has helped many of my clients to take a new perspective on their gambling issues. So that is one resource that I recommend outside of in-person or counseling support.
Thank you. I'm really glad you mentioned that. Gambling disorder is a health condition, but it doesn't come with, a runny nose, cough, or a fever, right? But it can have health implications. Often people may see their doctor for gambling-related health issues like sleep trouble, heart palpitations, ulcers, migraine headaches, etc., caused from sedentary activity, chronic stress, lack of sleep, mental health, substance use, all of these things. But they might not consider the gambling as the source, as a health issue. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. And the helpline, as he said, as we said earlier, it's available 24/7. Anybody can call it, whether they're a professional looking for resources to refer clients to. If there's someone calling for themselves because they're looking for help, it's completely confidential. They're calling for help for a spouse or loved one, child, friend, coworker. They can also call and get resources. And you guys kind of mentioned this, but I just want to reemphasize that in our state, treatment's available both for an individual who might feel like they need some help to be able to be free of gambling-related problems, and a loved one can get treatment and counseling because they get put through the ringer as well, and they still have their own life to put back together. They can get help services even if the person in their life who's gambling doesn't end up in help services. So that's something that's very unique, and we're very happy about in our state that family counseling is kind of part of the package, and it has a ripple effect. Gambling problems can have a ripple effect amongst family and loved ones and friends. So that's important. A couple other resources I'll point out might be Gamblers Anonymous. Some people may already be familiar with 12-step meetings such as Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. There's also Gamblers Anonymous for those who want to stop gambling. And there's also Gam-Anon for family members. And these days, you can find them online all times of day or night around the nation. And there may be local meetings if people prefer in person. They can do that as well. So if you go to our website for the blog for this episode, we've already listed some resources there, including the agencies that you two mentioned and some of the others that we've mentioned. If you are looking for help services and you're still watching this episode, hopefully we've encouraged you on where you can go to get help, and that this is something that people heal from all the time. And often when we're healing from things, we don't heal alone. It takes a group. And if you are a professional in this field and you've been watching this episode wanting to do more, maybe you've seen some problem gambling related effects in your work, and these might be the first two subject matter experts you've heard talk about it. I hope you are encouraged on how simple it is to just integrate some simple gambling screens, some simple referral resources, and start having that holistic approach to the very complex humans that we are, and the complex needs that we have. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I don't think I've forgotten anything off my to-do list to speak on today. I think we covered it all. So thank you, everyone. And we hope that you will participate in spreading awareness for Problem Gambling Awareness Month. You can follow us on whatever social media channel you happen to prefer these days, and you'll see all of the efforts we're making to spread help and hope for this condition.